Hey everybody, welcome back to a SUBTA Live. Today's Wednesday, and I've got my good friend Matt Fiedler from Vinyl Me Please who's joining us today, and we're going to be talking about customer experience and how the importance of the customer experience that's happening internally can mirror what's happening externally to your customers. And make sure you stick around to the end because Matt's got some really good tips for your business and how to enhance your customer experience. And I'm happy to welcome Matt. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Chris, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, great to see you again. Matt is one of the original speakers at the very first Sub Summit, which was in Detroit. And so we've been a good friend now for the last 5 years and done some really, really amazing things with Vinyl Me Please. I know that that's grown tremendously, so congratulations on that.
Thanks.
And Matt, let's get right into it. Tell me what customer experience means to you.
You know, I think it's one of those things where it's so much more all-encompassing than people, I think, really understand. Customer experience to me is really about how it's kind of, we used to always say at Vinyl Me Please that, like a great record, the whole is better than the sum of its parts, which is to say that the entirety of the experience is better than any individual component of it. There might be great tracks in a record. There might be a couple of good highlights here and there, but ultimately a great record is something that's cohesive, that at the end of that experience of listening to it, something has changed within you. And that's how I think about customer experience. It really is this idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah. And so we know that the customer experience has a huge effect on the business, especially in subscription, right? And like I always say, it's not just the product, right? It starts from the first ad that they see, the time they hit the website, the checkout flow, the post-purchase experience, and the delivery.
Yeah.
Right. And I always also say, like, you need to provide an experience that you wouldn't get on a retail level. What are some of the things you did at Vinyl Me Please that sort of, enhance that experience?
Yeah, I think one of the things that one of the mistakes that we made early on is we thought that there was kind of a linear, like the experience was linear, it would start and stop and there was a finish line, at a certain point. And certainly being kind of a monthly subscription business, it's pretty circuitous, but we always thought there was kind of a clear, start and finish to a given month or cycle or whatever it may be. And over time, what we really realized is that there is no finish line. There is no like end to the customer experience. Even if a person cancels or churns out or whatever, it's very circular. You know what I mean? And I think some of the things that we really invested in once we had that realization at VMP was that delivery experience. But it wasn't just, what's the unboxing? It was like thinking about, okay, if we were to put together a finish line, it's really after a person has spun a record 3 or 4 times. You know what I mean? And after they've really had a chance to go deep and experience and kind of play with the product to a degree. Whereas I think a lot of companies, one of the misconceptions that I see is a lot of companies assume that, like, man, it's so hard to get the product manufactured. Once it lands in the warehouse, then it's like, we're done. You know what I mean? But then you don't realize that the customer does not care. They don't know what's happening behind the scenes. All they know is the condition in which it shows up and their experience in using it. And once we had that realization for us, we put a ton more effort into, obviously the quality of the product and really making sure that we were producing the highest quality product on the market, but really that delivery experience and ensuring that everything that we delivered showed up in a pristine condition. And even if it didn't, that we had clear policies and practices for replacing that stuff, for resolving it from a customer service standpoint, and really focusing on kind of what we called the second 50%, or, that last half of that experience, which is once it lands or once it leaves the warehouse, really up until after a person has had the opportunity to listen to the record several times.
What are some of the things or things you've seen other businesses do that, post-transaction? So they've got the product. What are some of the experiences you've seen some brands do or you've done yourself that worked really well?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is when somebody makes a purchase, they're kind of at like the peak excitement, right? Like that is just, in an ideal scenario, like the person cannot wait to check out. They couldn't check out any faster because they're so excited to get the product. And whether that comes through just an impulse purchase or having been looking at it for a long time or whatever, that's kind of like the peak excitement. Inevitably, there's a valley between that moment and when they actually receive the product. So a question for us, and particularly in a subscription-based business where you have cadences and timelines and weird kind of if-then scenarios in terms of when somebody signed up, when they're going to get their first thing or whatever, But first thing we always try to do, and I think what a lot of successful companies do in this regard, is they try and shorten that window from purchase to delivery, to be as short as possible. But even in there, there's always going to be a gap. They try and keep the person engaged. They try and like build on that excitement so that it isn't like, oh, I bought this and now I'm just sitting here waiting, and now I'm actually quite frustrated because it's taking longer than I thought it would. You know what I mean? So being able to like increase or maintain that excitement that's happening in that valley there. But then I think also in the post like delivery experience, checking up and being like, hey, how did things show up? You know, how's your experience been? What was the condition of your box like? Are you liking it? You know, what questions do you have? How can we help you? And those are some of the things that I think, you know, I love customer service because I think that it's one of the most powerful marketing channels that a business can have, and it costs you virtually nothing. But the data, the feedback, and the ability to build a relationship with your customers through customer service, I think it's unlike any other channel that a business has. So really being able to leverage that one-to-one and kind of that personal relationship, you know, in that valley time between purchase and delivery, but then also post-delivery as well.
Yeah, I love how you said relationship. I'm really keen on that, and I think the most successful subscription businesses are building relationships, right, with the
Yeah.
consumer.
Yeah.
I know that one thing that you believe in, and I believe in it as well, is company culture is a big part of any business.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm big on company culture. I think that I'd like to say that chairmen or CEOs should be thinking about that like a good 5 to 10% of maybe their week, because we know how critical a good team is. Let's talk about how, you know, the company culture has the effect, or sort of what you mentioned, mirrors what the customer experience is for the consumer.
Yeah, I think it's just like an individual, you know what I mean? Like whatever's happening internally, whether it be sensations or emotions or otherwise, at some point finds its way out. You know what I mean? And that shows up in how you interact with people. It shows up in your disposition. It shows up in your mood, whatever it might be. I think the same thing is true for a company. And really what you end up seeing from a customer's point of view is you see how organized a business is. You see how strategic they are. You see how communicative they are, how clear they are, and what they're trying to say and where they're going. And from a customer standpoint, you know, speaking to the experience, that really is a reflection of what's happening internally. You know, so businesses that are always like behind the 8 ball, they're always sending emails out after, you know, you've gotten your delivery notification or whatever it might be. And just constantly trying to like keep up. In my mind, that's something's wrong internally. There's some amount of disorganization. There's some amount of chaos that's happening that hasn't been addressed. And those are the types of things I think when people think about customer experience that often get overlooked, because you fail to put yourself in the seat of a customer and really kind of look at it as if they're looking at it. And you start to put together, if you almost like Sherlock Holmes, kind of like the journey, or if you were just a customer kind of looking inside of a company, you can kind of put together like what's happening and who's saying what, you know, how well is the marketing department talking to the customer service department, which is talking to the product department, and so on and so forth. And there's that consistency of messaging that, you know, is often out or whatever it might be. And I think, again, one of the hardest things about a subscription-based business is it is very demanding from just like a cycle standpoint. You know, we used to talk about the hamster wheel all the time. And when there were many times where we were behind the 8 ball and having to react in certain circumstances, and our customers definitely knew that, you know, and oftentimes they were realizing things before we were, and they were telling us about it, and then we would, you know, move forward and do what we needed to do. But I would always tell our team, like, look, what's happening on the inside of our business is being reflected on the outside. So to the extent that, you know, we are disorganized, that is going to come through. To the extent that we're not communicating clearly, that is going to be seen. To the extent that we're not clear on what we're trying to do or what we're offering or what we're selling or the value or whatever it might be, that is also going to be unclear to the customer. So let's have these conversations, let's address them head on, and let's really work to solve them, because at the end of the day, that experience is what we're trying to build. And that, you know, it feeds into our mission of facilitating journeys through music and exploring music together and all these things that we can't reasonably do that if our hair is on fire and we're constantly reacting to things, you know, over here or playing that game of whack-a-mole that so many companies end up playing.
Yeah, it's like nothing's worse than the email you get to send everybody letting them know that it's going to arrive late, right? Or like that.
Yeah.
Right. And so then, like, you're right. That's like internally, I mean, again, there's things that happen, but it means internally we weren't prepared, right?
Yeah.
And like, it's a reflection. We weren't prepared, so we had to send out an email saying your product's going to arrive late, which then decreases the customer experience, and
Uh-huh.
it's a complete reflection.
And
I'm
don't
big,
get me wrong, there's a way you can say it's gonna come late
mhm,
and it still reflect positively
for
on the
sure.
company. That doesn't have to be a negative experience.
Yeah,
In our world, when we were ahead of it and when we were sort of telling people before they were expecting
yep,
something else, then that was when it was like, oh, cool, that's great, thanks, appreciate the heads up. But it was when it was like 3 days late,
yep.
like when they were expecting a delivery or a shipment notification and they haven't gotten something and they're like, what's going on? Like usually by this time of the month, like I get my delivery notification, like this is weird, and we're like, oh yeah, sorry, it's
Yeah.
delayed. You know,
Well, yeah, you're right. I think it's like you got to be proactive. If there's going to be an issue with any customer's product, like let them know instead of letting
mhm.
them find out later
Yeah,
and be more
yeah,
upset. And I think you're
yeah,
right. Communication's critical, just like
yeah, and
communication is
transparency.
critical in your team,
Yeah,
right? If you've got good transparency, good communication within your team, you'll have that with the subscribers.
yeah.
You
I
mentioned that
think
you're
those are
big
things
on.
again. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. What were you saying?
I think that transparency, those things are like values of a culture, right? That again end up getting reflected externally as well. So it's like a muscle, the more that you can flex those things and kind of stay true to them on the inside, of your organization, then it becomes so much easier to do
Right.
externally, and your customers. Those are the things that I think build trust, goodwill, loyalty at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, I like it. You mentioned you're big on customer service. I am as well. I remember
Yeah.
back in the gentleman's box days, like an email would come in at like 10 p.m. on a Sunday, and I was like responding to it. Right.
Yeah.
What are some? And then as you get bigger, obviously that's not as it's a little bit unreasonable to expect your customer service team to handle on a Sunday
Yeah.
at 10 p.m. But tell me some of the policies and procedures you had in place for your customer service team during normal business hours. Like, what was the response time look like? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of different scenarios and seasons where we were so far behind on customer service, and I think what it was really painful because what we saw was how important that is to our business and how important it is for people to get timely responses. Um, and so, there was, I don't know, it was probably like almost 2 years ago, we kicked off a major investment in customer support. And what I mean by that is like we went from having 2 or 3 full-time people like Monday through Friday, like 9 to 5 ish, to having like 7 to 9 people full-time Monday through Sunday,
Love it.
basically 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that was both email, chat, whatever, text is a channel that we integrated as well. And through that experience, we really saw the value of timely responses, of consistency of responses. And what's really interesting is it really changed the relationship we were able to have with our customers. And it went from being purely reactive to being somewhat proactive, and speaking again to being able to build that deep relationship. Like we weren't talking about like, oh, your record's damaged or it's missing or whatever. We're talking about, oh, hey, you bought this. You might also like this. You've never heard of it before, but
Mhm.
it's really great. And that's just a totally different relationship to have from a customer service standpoint. And that's where I think the real value of that channel comes to play. But at the same time, again, customer service is always going to be at the end of the whip. It's always going to be kind of the one to clean up the mess of your supply chain or your marketing team or whatever it might be. So to the extent that your customer service team can be involved in those conversations, can be made aware of things as they come up, and so on and so forth, then they have the ability to actually plan and kind of design responses accordingly. And speaking to policies and stuff like that as it relates to damages, we were pretty liberal with our policies for replacing things, and have been really aggressive, even more so recently with replacing stuff, just because we know that that's a huge part of the experience. And there's some times where we look at somebody's complaint and there's like a little ding on a corner that's so menial or whatever, but for them it
It
means
means a lot.
everything because they're a collector, and it's like the pristine condition is like 90% of the value of the product to them. So if it's not
Yep.
there, then what are they paying for is kind of their argument. So we got really we have a really generous replacement policy, and even in cases like that, we'll produce extra like print work and be able to replace the print work, or if the album is damaged, we can replace just the album. So we don't necessarily need to replace like the entire thing over and over again. And then at a certain point, like if somebody's just like, I'm not satisfied, then we'll say, okay, we're happy to cancel, we're happy to refund, we're happy to do whatever we need to do to make you feel good about this relationship and this transaction. Like, we don't want to handcuff anybody to us, and we don't want them, to obviously carry a resentment towards us. So I think it's actually, I went to cancel my car insurance like a year ago, and it was super easy. And I was like, you're not going to try and keep me at all?
Yeah.
Like, no, we know if we make it easy for you to cancel, then you're more likely to come back. And I think that's been a kind of a truism that we've held with VMP in terms of that customer service, and really making it frictionless for people to get their issue resolved as much as possible.
You know what I see? I love your take on this. I have my own take as well, but I always see people will comment and say, customer says they didn't get it, but shows delivered, and now they want another box or a refund. And like, it's that situation where it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe even a situation where someone signed for it, but what's your thoughts on, I know you've gotten that email.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Yeah, I think we always have like a layer of responses, right? So in the first instance for that, we'll say like, okay, wait another 2 or 3 days. Oftentimes, maybe your neighbor got it, something like that. It will just kind of show up, or for whatever reason, the mailman said it was delivered, but he didn't actually put it in the mailbox. Like, those things just always happen.
Someone else in the house grabbed it.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, that is like the solution. They're like, oh yeah, my roommate had it, or randomly just showed up on my doorstep. I don't know what happened.
Yep.
After that, we say like, let us know if you haven't received it at that point, and then we'll ship another one.
Yep.
And that usually resolves most things. And we ask them to confirm their address and all that type of stuff. But we always what you're getting at is like, to what extent are you able to trust your customers, and to what extent are you, willing to invest in your customer service for retention, whatever it might be. And I think there's always a balance there. Like, we always erred on the side of trusting our customers, but at the same time, there's people that just do it time after time after time. And you're like, okay, the first 5 times, like, totally.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. So like, we need another address to be able to ship these things to, or we have to cancel your account. You know what I mean? And there's always a balance there, and that's more subjective than it is objective. But we would always be, our customer service team is very relational, and they're very communicative with each other. So there's like, most people that do these types of things on a regular basis, they're known within the customer service team. And there's always the ability to be like, yeah, I don't know, he's done that like 5 or 6 times this
kind
year.
of track it, right?
Yeah.
Mark down that customer. Same thing. We used to try to watch. There'd be a few customers that you kind of start to see every other month, right? And you just track it. And like you said, he asked him for another address. He asked for a work address. So I'm totally with you. I think, when some of these startups, it's tough for them, right? Like, they're thinking, I got to send another box, but you kind of just have to. People are good. People aren't trying to, 99.9% of people are not trying to get over on somebody, right? And then there's some that do, and you watch it, right?
If you think of how much of our society is built on like interpersonal trust, like, and even there was a season where we got super particular about the amount of money that we were spending in replacements and stuff like that, and we really tried to wind that down, but it just didn't feel right. It didn't sit well with us. So we kind of reverted course and went back to like, not totally subjective and that it's wild west, but like deferring to the relationship and really trying to go above and beyond to the extent that we felt it was reasonable with the customer. But there's always a line there, Yeah,
for sure. So I believe, is your team working remote now? Or they have been? Yeah. So tell me a little bit how you've been able to sort of enhance or keep the company culture, because it's harder, right? When you're remote. Yeah. What are some of the things you've done? We back in last year, we did like a Zoom game night, right? Like, but like, now most of us, not all of us are back in, but we're like hybrid. But tell me a little bit some of the things you're doing now that you're remote to keep that experience, that culture high.
Yeah, we were fortunate when COVID hit. We had already had like 2 defined working from home days per week. So we already had it was Mondays and Fridays, and then Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, we were in the office together. So we already had kind of like the makings of a remote culture, so to speak. And when we went remote, we saw a lot of good things. And I think what a lot of companies have seen is like increased productivity. And then we also saw a lot of bad things, whether it be burnout or what have you. And I think one of the hardest things for me as the leader was communication. and relationships. And what I saw is like I didn't have kind of the casual passing by time in the
Yeah.
office to like build a relationship with somebody that I didn't work directly with. And so, it was kind of a light bulb moment for me where I was like, oh man, I have to work a lot harder to like build relationships with people. And we have to work a lot harder to, make sure that we're reinforcing our vision and our objectives and kind of what we're doing and where we're going and why and all that stuff in so many different ways. And it became exhausting because it's like you have the same conversation however many times you have employees times however many weeks or months that you end up needing to do that. But I think some of the stuff I wouldn't claim to say that we've figured it out per se, but I think what we've really tried to do and what we've always tried to do is say like you're a person first and you're an employee second, and like we trust you to get your work done and to do it within a reasonable timeline and to hold yourself accountable and to be accountable to your team and everything. But at the same time, like you have a lot of flexibility. Like it doesn't matter if it gets done at 7 p.m. or
as long as it gets done.
And I think that's really, in a certain way, that's really helped kind of our team just like decompress in a way, just kind of like open things up a little bit. And granted that there's always a second side to something like that, but I'd say that's been really helpful, and just like encouraging people to sort of take time and live their life and do what they felt they needed to do, and if they wanted to go for a run, do it. But then I think one of the things that we've really had to do too is encourage people to take time off. You know what I mean, and really find a way to disconnect entirely and to like not open their computer. And that's been more challenging than I ever would have thought, particularly in the remote world. Is really giving people the permission to like step away, because the line is so blurred right now between like self and work and whatever, that like helping people remind themselves that like they're not just robots, and the expectation is not just that they show up from whatever this time to this time or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, like I struggle with a few things on it, right? Like I think absolutely it's been proven that people are more productive, but there's this there's something about the engagement when you're all in the office together, the creative ideas that come to fruition when you're together. And I think that you're giving that more personal relationship with your employees. So I love having a really good relationship with my employees. So like I felt so disconnected for the last year and a half.
I get so angsty. I'm just like, and in part because like the telephone game is just constant, where it's like everybody's relaying some version of the message that ends up not being at all true by the time it gets to the end of the line. And then you have to be like, okay, guys, hold on, let's come back and let's talk about this thing. Like, let's course correct. That was some of the hardest stuff for me in this world.
Yeah, I had to weigh out. I mean, I think every leader probably has a preference, and I think a hybrid is a good solution for the future. I'm so engaged. I'm so like invested in wanting to make sure that like my team is like awesome and they're good and they're happy. And when I can't see them every day, it's like so hard to see that, right? Like even my aunt and Liz, she's amazing, right? And she's been promoted to another position, and like she gets way more work done. She jokes with me like, "Hey, I get way more work done," like because she's not next to me at the office. But there's just still something about, again, being able to bounce off ideas, about getting a hold of each other quickly, right? It's like it's so easy to like decline a call versus like they grab you and they stop you when you're walking by and you got to answer the question. So, no, but that's great. I'm glad that you sort of figured it out, and I think that that's some good lessons for people that need to think about this new world of business, right? There's going to be some hybrid, and I think it also opened people up to hiring people that are in other states, right? Like we had a SUBTA member that was in California, like a team member, that's great, right? Like we get their work done. So, but we're almost close on time here. So before we get done, I'd love for you to just give like 2 or 3 tips, that your top tips to businesses that want to enhance their customer experience.
I think, so 2 or 3. I'd say the first one is put yourself in sort of the shoes of your customer, and stop thinking about like what's happening internally, and just look at what is happening from a customer experience standpoint. And what I mean by that is like read your emails, think about how that's timed with this or that or whatever, like inspect your thing when it comes up or when it's delivered. put yourself into that unboxing experience. Like, try and imagine you're like this is the first time that you've ever opened one of your boxes before. Like, what's that like? I think that is just so, and you can do that just subjectively on your own, or you can do it and like actually create a journey map and like define all the touch points. And transactional email sent here, this is what it says, and then this is sent, and then this is sent, and then this happens, and it's like, very quickly, we did that one time, and very quickly you start to realize, like, oh my gosh, we were overwhelming with people with emails and communication, and also they're wildly inconsistent with one another. Like, 8 different people have written 8 different emails, and there's no consistency to voice, there's no consistency to whatever, and then also this thing just doesn't make sense as it aligns with the broader experience. So I would say that's definitely one. The other one, I would definitely spend time with your customer service team and just talk to them about what they're hearing from customers, like what's working, first and foremost. That's always good to know. And what's not working. What are the common complaints? What are the common things that people are getting stuck on? What are the ideas that they have for resolving those things? Or what hacks have they built, to be able to manage, resolve a customer service issue or whatever. I think those things are always super insightful because, one, your customer service team is like the front line, so they're going to see everything, even if they don't know anything. And then 2, like, they're insanely creative because they're able to take in like what this person is doing over here to help what this person needs over here. And like, that's not necessarily something that you've directed them to do. They're just doing that because they saw what worked and they, the person has the same issue. So I'd definitely say spend time with them. The other thing that, I've just recently, in some of the work that we've been doing with Unbreakable, been spending a lot more time on is really kind of spending time with customers or potential customers and doing like hour-long interviews or conversations with them. And it's not always like for a specific purpose, but I think there's an opportunity, like, tell me more about that is one of my favorite, it's not even a question, one of my favorite statements. Because when somebody says something and you're like, oh, that's really interesting, could you say more about that? Then all of a sudden you get like a pile of information that you're like, holy shit, I never would have thought about that. Or that's totally different than anything that we have talked about internally. And I think that that's so valuable and so meaningful. We did that a little bit at BNP, but not to the extent that I wish we had now. And doing it now and some of the consulting work that we're doing, it's been pretty transformative for the projects that we're working on.
Yeah, I think what's critical there is interviewing current customers, past customers, and potential customers, right? Like, learn across the spectrum, because the ones that left are going to tell you a lot, so that you can make better decisions. The ones that are on are going to tell you what they love and what they want to see more of. And the potential ones are going to tell you whether or not they'd want to sign up, right? So, Matt, this was awesome. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support to SUBTA. I know that you're not going to be able to make it out this year because you got some family stuff going on, but you're up for a CUBE Awards. That's amazing. And hopefully we'll see you in 2022. We'll be in Orlando. In Florida. For everybody that's watching, we're less than 2 weeks away from Sub Summit. Really looking forward to seeing so many of you there. There's an opportunity to apply for free tickets, so check that out at subsummit.com. And I hope everybody has an amazing week. Thanks again, Matt. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chris. Congrats on all you've achieved. It's amazing.
Thanks, talk to you soon, Matt.
Yeah.